So we have noted before that translators are by definition also interpreters of the text, and how they translate a word or a phrase, it can very much affect how we understand any particular passage or verse. And that can also include, even when translating into a language like English, the punctuation that is used. I remember years ago when I had the opportunity to study with Professor Nechama Leibowitz in Israel, she loved to play with punctuation. And she would say things like, lo, tirtzach, which is the Hebrew phrase, thou shalt not murder, all right? But you put lo, comma, no, tirtzach, emphasis, no, murder. Right? And you can see just in that how quickly just a translator with a comma or something can change completely how we understand a verse. And this is compounded when we get to verses that are a little fuzzier than something like thou shalt not murder. So the opening of our parasha starts as follows. The Lord said to Abram, go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. And then verse 2, it starts easily enough. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great. And then it gets complicated. Right? If you look at the translations, I've given you 4. I could have brought you more, but essentially they all fall into one of the 2 camps. So the old JPS, which is about 100 years ago, and be thou a blessing. What does and be thou a blessing suggest? That you have to act a certain way, okay? New JPS, and you shall be a blessing. That would be true either way, I think. But yes, in the second one, your actions will themselves somehow be a blessing. I was intrigued that the Art Scroll actually echoes the New JPS translation, and then Everett Fox comes along and says, be a blessing! Exclamation mark! Right? It's a command, right? And that's a different reading, because what he's also done is the first 3 parts of the verse 2, I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, period. Right? That's part of God's promise, and be a blessing is somehow a different statement. And he's the only translator, really, who does it that way, because that's not inherent in the Hebrew. Okay, now, translators don't exist in a vacuum, and the people who did the various translations into English are also students of Bible, and students of Bible, when they're trying to figure out what a verse means, go to biblical commentaries that have been accrued over time. Right? So one of the favorites, and I've showed you this before, is something called Mikraot Gedolot, which places the biblical text in the center. This is a translation into English, but in the Hebrew, in the original, you would have 2 different Aramaic translations, and then a whole bunch of other commentaries in much, much smaller font. And if the creators of Mikraot Gedolot had the capacity, they would have had little fold-out pages where you would have folded out the top and the side in order to put more people on the page. Instead, they just stuck all the people who were more contemporary at the back of their book. But the translators will go to a text like this and say, I have to try to understand what the verse means. Let me see what the commentators say, right? Start with Rashi, because you always start with Rashi, because he is like the dean of biblical commentators. And Rashi says, you will have the power to bless whomever you wish. What's Rashi suggesting here? All right, and Rashi sort of is paraphrasing the midrash that I brought just underneath it. It's from Breshit Rabbah. Blessings will be given through you, as up to now they were given through me. Who's the me? God. All right, so what is Rashi suggesting, and what is the midrash asserting? Not all people. Abram will have the power of God, to so to speak, to say, I bless you. And guess what? It will take. Because somehow God is investing Abraham with divine power. That's a lot. Yo. I think that the implication of Rashi and Breshit Rabbah is that you will have the power to offer a blessing on someone or for someone. I don't think it's meant as sort of a transitional thing where I'm doing something for you. I think some of the other commentators get more towards that. I think this is a much more aggressive interpretation. Let's look next at Ramban. And Ramban, Nachmanides, lives in the 13th century, and Nahum Sarna, who writes the commentary which forms the basis of the commentary to the book of Genesis in our Eitz Chaim, kind of say the same thing. All right? So Ramban says, you will be the standard by which people will bless themselves. Right? May God make you like Abram, or Abraham by now. So what's the implication here? What's Ramban suggesting? Okay, so if I say, may God make you like Abraham, I want you to be a person of great faith, or I want you to be a person of whatever qualities Abraham had. That's a great question, and the answer is twofold. One is the creators of the blessing lifted it from an existing blessing in the Torah, right? That the words that we say to our children on Friday night, as particularly our male children, is a quote from Jacob. Jacob is blessing his grandsons, and and so becomes, you should be like Ephraim and Manasseh, just as Jacob blessed them. So that's kind of the genesis of it. And I guess, Midrash is a funny thing. It's also very contextual. So centuries later, you have rabbis who are sitting no longer in the land of Israel. They're sitting in the diaspora. And they feel a certain affinity to Ephraim and Manasseh because where are Ephraim and Manasseh raised? In Egypt. Remember, Joseph goes down there, he becomes vice king, or whatever, vice pharaoh, I guess technically. And he has two children, and he raises them not just in Egypt, but he raises them in the court, in the heartland of Egyptian religion and culture and everything. And for the sages, Ephraim and Manasseh become the paradigm of how do you raise Jewish children in the diaspora? How do you ensure Jewish continuity. And so the idea of blessing them, you, my son, who are growing up in Minsk or Pinsk, you should be as Jewishly identified as Ephraim and Manasseh were. So let's come back to Ramban and Sarna for a second. You will be the standard. Right? So theoretically, may God make you like Abraham means you're getting the best blessing possible. What else could it mean? Wouldn't hurt. But look at how Sarna has tweaked it a little bit. You will serve as the standard by which a blessing is invoked. Sarna tweaked the idea a little bit. Okay, so in order to be blessed, you've got to hit some milestones, right? If Abraham is the litmus test of becoming blessed or being blessed, then you got big shoes to fill. No, he's not. Or may you, yes. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So you can see where they're informing each other and how they're sort of adapting it in a way that is nuanced and comfortable for them. Okay? Let's look at Rabbeinu Gershon, Gersonides in English. That is, be a man of blessing, one whose actions make him worthy of receiving divine providence. What's Rabbeinu Gershon done here? Be a blessing becomes be a man of blessing. That your actions should be reflective of blessedness, perhaps. That you are worthy in your actions. Right? And David Kimchi says the Hebrew uses the imperative. Neheyeh bracha is an imperative statement. And so clearly Fox is reading Kimchi and going, yes, I'm going to read the verse the same way. And therefore, I put the period where I did, and I said, be a blessing. Non-optional. Command form. What's remarkable is the Middle Ages, they had a lot more free time. And one of the things you see in the Middle Ages are lists of the 613 mitzvot in the Torah. Maimonides wrote one, Smog wrote, there's a whole bunch of them. And the reason there's a whole bunch is they don't all agree with each other, right? So the question is, do any of the medieval lists of mitzvot read this verse and put that as a mitzvah? The answer is no. So on one level, Kimchi is being kind of radical in how he's reading the verse. Not in a way that we're uncomfortable, but it's fascinating that he is looking at the verse in a way that his contemporaries are not. And Samson Raphael Hirsch follows in that same path. This is not a promise, but a command. To merit the promised reward, in other words, if you want to become a great nation and you want me, namely God, to bless you, and you want your name to be great, then you have to earn it. And then Hirsch ends with, you must so live as to be a blessing to the world. Right? On one level, Hirsch is trying to kind of have it all ways, or both ways. It's like, A, it's a command about behavior, sort of gets to Arnie's question from a few minutes ago. And if you really want to earn all of those blessings, you have to be a blessing in how you act in the world. And so he's kind of taking both of them and having both in there because he doesn't want to negate one possible interpretation versus another. And just for me, it was just an interesting little insight into both translation process, interpretive process, and trying to understand what the text is saying to us. What is it saying to me? Do I have to be like Abraham in order to get to that plateau, in order to be worthy of blessing? Or is it just good enough for me to be a blessing by being the best version of me, doing things that are a blessing in the world? I will let you each figure out how you are going to be a blessing, and I'll expect your written response by next Shabbat. Let's turn back to our Sidurim.